Good morning. We're going to begin because otherwise some other people will just come in, but there's lots of things to talk about today. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming to the event. Those that don't know me, my name is Alejandro Arango. I'm 365 talent director. Besides, thanking you very specially for coming to this great innovation moment that we're going to live. I want to very especially thank Sergio Arboleda University and its important business school, Prime Business School, Coordinadora, Avianca, Seguros Bolívar, ADECO, in medio. If it wasn't for them and for betting on this type of initiative, bringing this type of people that have never come to Colombia, it would have been impossible to do this event. Besides the great guru that we are bringing for you today, we're going to have some great panelists in the second part from 9:20 on. So I thank you very much. Great innovator, Senator Ivan Duque Santiago Aparicio from Rappi Application, Andre Walbra from Avianca Innovation, the Dean of Law of the University, and in this great event center and advisor in innovation. From Sergio Arboleda and Dr. Alvaro Gonzalez, the Marketing VP from Coordinadora. Thank you for accompanying us. Many of you with whom we talked every day, we always reach the point where the importance of education and the vector of innovation to change Colombia is something critical. And for 2 years ago or so, we had mapped out a great character that had changed companies like Coca-Cola. Sorry, let me turn this off. A great individual that had never come to Colombia, and Andy Stefanovich, but had bet on innovation and shaping in major universities, major characters that are making big changes in society. So the first challenge was to tell him, come to Colombia. The beginning was a little reluctant. We took a year and a half convincing him to bring, and finally, with the support of the sponsor, we were able to bring him. This morning, going to be split into 2 segments. We're going to have several very interesting surprises for you. The first, that Andy is launching his new Reimagine Innovation Conference. So Colombia, coincidentally, is going to be one of the first countries to receive it. And in the second batch, we're going to have a panel with these important leaders that are passion for innovation, where Andy is going to discuss with them, and you're going to have the opportunity to interact with Andy. We're going to raffle some books in his bestseller signed by him, and at the end, one of the seats, which I don't know which one it is, has a special prize for 1 hour of consulting with Andy. That's going to be well planned out, but with this, having this guru telling us or hearing about it, is going to be great innovation for the company. So I don't steal more the show from Andy. We made a small video to introduce him. You have a great booklet that we made for you, so that you take the notes that Andy is going to allow us to interact more than to listen to the innovation theories, to live innovation as he has made it live to major companies in the world. And I'll leave you with this short video of introduction. It's 8:30, so let's stay until 10:20 or so to have all the interaction and all the experience that Andy wants with you. And welcome and have a great time.
El mundo se mueve. Cada segundo se vive un proceso dinámico en una serie de transformaciones sociales, donde la información, la economía, la tecnología e incluso la cultura se desplazan con rapidez. La dura competencia de los mercados invita a reflexionar sobre los retos a los que se enfrentan diariamente las compañías, en donde no basta solo con tener a los mejores profesionales y obtener su mejor desempeño. Se trata de encontrar y entender la clave que le permita al talento humano obtener fórmulas que mejoren la productividad y la competitividad, encontrar ideas exitosas y ponerlas en marcha, descubrir oportunidades ofreciendo soluciones, crear experiencias de negocio. Todo ello para responder a las exigencias de los actuales mercados. Esa es la clave de la innovación. Para entender qué es la innovación y por qué es la clave que nos permite desarrollar todas esas competencias, hoy le damos la bienvenida a Colombia a uno de los más reconocidos expertos de la innovación a nivel mundial, un reconocido consultor empresarial, orador y autor del libro bestseller Look at More, referente en el mundo de los negocios, el marketing y la publicidad. Reconocido también por implementar modelos de innovación empresarial desde adentro hacia afuera. Durante los últimos 20 años ha sido partícipe de la innovación en compañías como Coca-Cola, Disney, General Electric, Procter & Gamble, American Express, Calvin Klein, Oscar Mayer y el Comité Olímpico Estadounidense. Andy es fundador de su propia compañía Play y profesor visitante en muchas universidades como Yale, Dartmouth, Michigan, Duke, Richmond y Wharton School of Leadership. Con ustedes, Andy Stefanovich.
Hello. Hello, Colombia. Hi. Thank you. That's so Hollywood. That's amazing. A lot of echo. Can we get that? There we go. That's better. Hello, Colombia. Nice to be with you guys. They told me that I could sing and dance and have as much fun up here as possible because that's what we do in this country. That's okay. We can have fun. It's okay. We can make this loose and casual and informal. So it's a pleasure to be with you. I am absolutely thrilled. This is my first trip to Colombia. I got picked up at the airport last night. We went to Alejandro, where did we go? Andres with Heaven, Hell, and Purgatory, and I was drinking coconut drinks with, it was crazy. I love Colombia. And I've just started. We're going to Medellin tonight, and we'll be back in Bogota tomorrow for just this little trek and this road tour around what innovation is in this Colombia market, in this beautiful country, and what you guys are doing around the topic, and what it means to you. What does innovation mean to you? What is it? What can it mean to you? What have you done with it? What would you like to do with it? How can it serve as a differentiation or a way to help you kind of step in next place in terms of thinking about your country and the pride and the innovation and the growth and the outcomes and all the aspiration you want to be as a country? It's one of those words that help you achieve all these things, politically, economically, socially, physically, spiritually, product-wise, company-wise, industry-wise, university. All these things are in the big stew as we stir are the ingredients called innovation. So what I want to do for the next hour is just tell you stories and let you take very copious notes in those beautiful laser-engraved journals that Alejandro and his team had. Look how beautiful they are. No, take it out, open up to the first page, and be ready. Take your pen, and be ready, because we're going to take good notes and have a lot of stuff in that journal that when you leave today, there'll be 2 or 3 things that I want you to think about around how to think about innovation and creativity and imagination and inspiration, which is a word that I'll use quite often in the next hour. Inspiration, 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 which is the fuel for innovation. So we are going to be taking this journey of storytelling. I'm going to be asking you to take notes. But first and foremost, I need one person to raise their hand and say, I am excited to be here and I'm a volunteer. Who is that person? I need one person that's going to be the crazy one that raises their hand right there. The beautiful woman in the blue dress. Can you stand up? What is your name? Nina? Lena? Close? Okay, we'll go with that. Lena, so I want you to leave. Can you leave? Maria, can you take Nina out that door? And I'm so sorry, you've traveled this way and you look beautiful, but I'd love if you left and you leave the room right now. But you're going to take notes, but in 10 seconds, I want you to come back in, okay? Is that a deal? Will you come back? Deal. What's her name? Lena? Lena, got it. All right. So when Lena comes back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I want everyone to stand up and give her the biggest, embarrassing standing ovation you've ever given anybody. And let it go on as long as you need to make her blush and be very awkward and uncomfortable. Got it? Got it. Hey, Lena, come on in. Come on in. Woo! Come on out. Come on out. Come on out. Take it away. Take it away. Everybody, Lena. Woo! A little bit more. A little bit more. And who knows Lena? Who knows her in the crowd? Anybody?
No, I came by myself.
You came by yourself. So this is perfect. So everybody lean into the stage, and Lena's going to take it over for the next hour. She's an expert in innovation. She's an author. She teaches at university. You ready for that? Yeah. She's very confident. I like this. This is great. So here's how did it feel when you had that standing ovation?
It feels like you own it.
Like you own it. And when you walked up, did you feel a little bit special, like here I am?
Yeah, it's all about the group, huh? Like how people make you feel like that.
Yeah.
All your insecurities just disappear.
All your insecurities just disappear. Take good notes. All the insecurities disappear. Any line, any quote, anything that's said by me or anyone in the audience in the next hour or 2 hours needs to be, if it resonates with you, if it makes you feel as if that might help you thinking about this, write it down. All your insecurities go away. How did it make you guys feel? Kind of fun? Kind of fake, like, yeah, we're going to applaud this woman. We don't know her, but we love her for this minute because Andy's making us do this, right? But how did it make you feel? Better? A little joy? Yeah? They were having fun. These guys were like, I think you're big fans of Lena. Huge fans. How did it make you feel? How did it make you feel? Very good. Good for her, good for you. That good for everyone. So all of a sudden, we just went from Lena to you guys, to the room, to maybe Columbia, to maybe a little bit of a ripple in the world. Because the world needs to celebrate people all the time. And what I'm getting at is this idea of a standing ovation, because everybody, Lena, let me ask you this question. Why did you deserve a standing ovation?
There's something that I wrote here before you even came, while we were waiting. Which was, there's always something that people say when they talk about innovation, which is think out of the box.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what I wrote. I made this little drawing.
Wait, first visually, look at this beautiful illustration. This is deserving of a standing ovation.
So it's something I've been thinking about lately, which is think out of the box. And then I drew this box. And it says everything that makes a box in our world, which is society, politics, religion, education, judgment, law, economics, blah, blah, blah. And then in the middle says, in the beginning, there was no box. So
we made the box.
We make the box.
Yeah.
So that's about what I believe in about innovation.
How is that? How is that? This is deserving of a standing ovation, not a fake standing ovation. This is authentic. Everybody give it up for Lena one more time.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. So the idea is that everybody has a standing ovation in them, and I want you to think about what we just did and what we just celebrated, a person we didn't know for reasons we didn't know, and all of a sudden she shares her story and what's written on her beautiful journal with beautiful illustration, and all of a sudden we realize that there's an amazing idea and inspiration in every single person. And we need to either in reality or virtually give them a standing ovation. So as I talk, and Lena got at it beautiful. What were some of the things around the box? Spirit and perception, spirit, etc. These are intangibles. What I'd like you to write down right now is intangibles over tangibles. Because I'm going to talk about for the next 45 minutes or so this idea that all these small, 1 degree, nuanced, emotional, Small, intangible things are the difference between driving innovation at a company and a culture of Columbia, as opposed to what we sometimes lean on so heavily, which are the processes, the technologies, the tools, the techniques, the infrastructure, the investment. Those are critically important, but not nearly as important as the stuff I want to talk to you about. So let me go to my wedding day. So it's April 16th, 1993. I'm marrying Jill Marie Lamacchia, my college sweetheart, in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, way up by Chicago. It's a beautiful day. It's 11:58. It's been months and months of planning. Jill's mom is sitting in the front row over here. So you're the Lamacchias, okay? You're the Lamacchias. You're the Stefanoviches, my family. And we've got the Lamacchias all lined up and all the Stefanoviches lined up and all the family members, 100 Serbians, that's my nationality, and 100 Italians, her nationality. And it's 11:58. And I'm standing behind that little vestibule with my best men, and the bridesmaids are all over here, and everything's perfect, right? Everything is absolutely just like the wedding planner wanted, just like Mrs. Lamacchia wanted, just like my mom wanted. She's so proud. I'm about to marry the college sweetheart of my dreams. And it's 11:58, and up on the balcony, you guys up there are Jill's high school friend playing violin. Not very well, because she was just free, and it was Ave Maria, and it's 11:59, and here we are. It's 11:59, 1 minute from going down. I can see the wisp of Jill's dress way back in the back, and I'm about to walk up and marry my sweetheart from college, and all of a sudden, at 11:59 and a half, when I'm about to walk out and take this woman to be my bride, up from the outside of like in the middle of the audience of the Stefanovich section, my Uncle Mitch walks up. And he walks right to the front of the church, and my Uncle Mitch, who was about 70 at this age, he's a first-generation immigrant from Serbia. He had a polyester suit on that was brown with a tie about up to here. He was in his mouth an unlit cigar, and he said, "Hey, everybody, I'm Uncle Mitch." This is true. And Jill leans over and does one of the, what the? And I go, I don't know. And there is Uncle Mitch in the front of the church at 12 o'clock, and he says, I don't know, but I've known Andy for 42 years, and he's he likes the moment, right? And I know Jill after the last 20 years of being with her too, and I just don't feel like this moment is the moment that it ought to be. This moment isn't the moment that it ought to be. Let's make that moment it ought to be. And as I think about this, based on a Catholic wedding, we're all going to be family in about 15 minutes. And you've got like the aunt over here wearing the same dress as the aunt over here, and you've got all that tension going on, right? And so all of a sudden, Uncle Mitch says, you know what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to all get up. And I'd like you to get up, and I'd like to get to know each other, because we're all going to be family. Why is it the Lamacchias are over here looking to the Stefanoviches? And why are the Lamacchias saying, why couldn't Jill married a really well-off Italian as opposed to a mid-grade Serbian? But that's what's going through all of our minds. But I know what we're all really thinking is that we're all going to be family. So get up and get to know each other. And they did for 15 minutes. Everyone left their pew, got up, and gave not like a sissy hug, not like a hug with a pat, like a gymnast giving another gymnast a hug, but they gave like an Italian giving a Serbian or a Colombian giving a hug. It was full body and emotional and a big kiss on the cheek, and it was lovely, and it was beautiful, and it was authentic and human. And all of a sudden, they didn't sit down Lamacchias and Stefanoviches, they sat down a family. And we had the two aunts wearing the same dresses right there in the fourth row, making fun of each other and giving high fives. And all of a sudden, everything changed. Everything changed. And then all of a sudden, Jill is coming down the aisle with her dad, and her dad, Mr. Lamacchia, he's my new father-in-law to be, and I'm a bit nervous, and he hugs me, and he says to me, I'm glad that worked out. And I said, me too, Mr. Lamacchia. I'm glad that was better than it should have looked, right? It worked out okay. And he said, now marry my daughter and get on with this thing. And I took Jill, and we moved up here. And I am the very emotional Serbian who cries at about anything. My eyes water up, my glasses fog over. I am the girl in the relationship. My wife is the man in the relationship. And that is just the way we were built, right? Jill grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with like chewing nails, and I grew up not that way. And so all of a sudden, we're getting married, and I'm feeling this emotion run through me because now it's about time to wed this woman of my love. And all of a sudden, we're here, and we're facing the minister, and he's about to do the vows. And Jill is seeing me be a complete blubber, a complete mess. I am sobbing. I'm not crying like, ha ha. I'm sobbing and blubbering, and I'm in a joke. I'm a complete embarrassment. And Jill is like looking at me like, really? Really? On my wedding day, you're going to let this whole thing get over you, and you're not going to be able to control yourself, and you're going to miss the moment. And she says, with a little bit of kind of conviction and a little bit of steely eyes, she looks at me and says, Andy, it's all going to be okay because I'm not wearing any underwear. And all of a sudden, I became more of a man. And I kind of lost that whole emotional thing, and I clicked my heels together, and I looked at her, and I said, really? And she goes, yeah, the whole getting dressed and all the buttons up the back, and the bridesmaid, and the getting the hair ready, and the makeup, it was just too much, and I forgot. So you ready to get married? And I was like, yes, ma'am, let's get married. And we did. Uncle Mitch and my wife did what I want you to write down right now. They purposely disrupted the moment to make the moment it needed to be. They purposely disrupted the moment to make the moment it needed to be. And by creating that disruption, that purposeful disruption, they wrote the narrative. They wrote the narrative that my wedding day and our wedding day as a group of 200 people was going to be that much better. And how many times do we sit in meetings or sit in places where we just let it go by us, and when we walk out we say, I should have said, it would have been a good time if I would have brought up I should have mentioned that we could make it better, but you didn't. They purposely disrupted the moment to make the moment it needed to be. And if we allow ourselves to allow the moments just to flow over us, time will get lost and we'll miss that opportunity. As we think about capturing the zeitgeist of what's going on in Colombia around Medellin being named #1 and all the great things that are going on in your country right now and your industry, which I've learned a lot about, you must make that moment the moment it needs to be by disrupting it purposely in a place that makes the narrative you want it to be, and not letting it flow over you. So I'm in Palo Alto, and I'm going to dinner with a really fancy guy. He's really well regarded. He's Silicon Valley executive. And I don't get nervous very often, but I was kind of excited for this one because he was about to invest in a fund that I was involved in. And it was 15 years ago, so I was 35 years old and probably not as warmed up to the idea of meeting with people like that at that point. And so I called Jill and I said, Jill, I'm a little bit kind of thrown off my game. What do I do? And she said, well, as always, go get a good meal and have a couple beers and relax. And so I went down to the concierge and I said, I want to go to a nice meal, and Jill said I should spend $100 American all on me tonight to relax and have some good beers and relax before my big meeting tomorrow. And he looks me up and down, and I've got a t-shirt on, jeans, and some boots. He looks me up and down, and he's like, that's what you have to wear? And I said, it is all I have. If you could just put me to a nice restaurant wearing this and let them accept me, please do. Reluctantly, he picks up the phone, calls the restaurant. I make my way to the restaurant. The maitre d' and the concierge definitely talked, because when I walked in, the restaurant guy at the front looked at me and went, you're the table for one from the so-and-so hotel. And I said, I am. And he looked at me very smug, and he grabbed the leather binder of wine and the leather binder of the menu, and he said, follow me. And he took me on this labyrinth walk through the restaurant, and he took me by all the great tables with the great food, and then he moved me through some other great social conversation of some really neat people over here, and then he plopped me down right over here looking into the bathroom and the kitchen by myself. And so I kind of looked up at him, and he gave me the menu and the wine menu, and I said, no, you follow me. And I took him, by the way, exactly through the exact same configuration, by the cool people and by the great food, and I plopped myself at the first bar stool right by the entrance, and I had a 4-hour dinner with the Croatia, Serbia, right? My brother in arms, right? Croatia Serbian bartender for 4 hours. I had shrimp creole. I had homemade bread. I had 2 Pilsner Urquells, one too many. I had the chefs bringing out little tasting plates for me. We cried when the Yankees were winning on the baseball game. We shared emotions. He walked around from the bar and we gave a big hug. And we got emotional, and I cried when I left, no surprise. And he cried a little bit too. And I had the best 4 hours ever. Because I said, no, you follow me. And as we allow the world and we allow the narrative to drive our script, it's something I want you to be cognizant of. You say, when we need to, in your business or your industry or this country, no, you follow me. Because people are looking for those leaders. And what happened to the maitre d' after all of that 4 hours, as he observed, grudgingly, the first couple hours, I can't believe he's having so much fun, and I can't believe he's wearing that outfit at the first bar stool, and I can't believe this is going on in my restaurant. What did he do at the end? He walked me out and walked me to the hotel, and he said, in my 20 years of being the maitre d' of that restaurant, I've never seen so much love and joy between a patron and the bartender. And you brought so much energy to the place, and I think I want to think about how I do things now. And I want you to think about, no, you follow me, because people are looking for those leaders to do that, and they're looking for someone to create the narrative. I want you to write this down now. I'm going to pour into you a bunch of stuff, and again, it's only 2 or 3 things that'll resonate with you, right? Of the intangible things I go through, only 2 or 3 should be the things that you use as a way to think. I want you to write down ritual over ceremony. Ritual over ceremony. Back to my wedding. A ceremony is completely scripted. Every line item, every minute, to the second, everybody knew exactly what was going to happen. Bridesmaid, 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 groomsman, groomsman, mother of bride, mother of groom. Everything is perfect. But I recommend to you to think about the idea of innovation through the lens of being more ritualistic, not ceremonial. Ceremonial is perfect. Ritual is half scripted and half left to chance. I've made this point indirectly and directly now a couple different ways, but I want you to think about creating the narrative and being a part of the narrative and not letting the narrative happen to you. So there was this great guy. I produce and curate the TEDx in Richmond, Virginia. Do you guys have a TEDx here in Bogota? Do you? And you have one in Medellin? They're beautiful. And so I've been going to TED. I'll be in Vancouver next week for a week, but I've been going to TED for years. And so I brought the TEDx, the small licensed version of TED, to Richmond, Virginia. And we sell out a big 1,800 person place. If you want to come, I'll send you a ticket. If you get there, it's all on me. Dinner at my house the night before, ticket to the event. I will take care of you like you guys are taking care of me, I promise. If 400 of you do that, it'll be tough in my house, but we'll figure it out. We'll put a tent up. We'll figure it out. The idea is that I had a gentleman on the stage a couple years ago, and his name was Danny Avula. And Danny stood on the stage after about 2 months of being coached by the best speaker coach I could find to help him get comfortable in being in front of 1,800 people. Well, he was an academic and a teacher and a professor, and standing in front of 1,800 people is very different than a classroom of 30 people at University of Virginia in a small analytics class that he taught. And so he had a hard time getting comfortable in front of this audience, and he said, Andy, I just don't know if I'm comfortable doing this. I said, Danny, your topic and your view of the way we ought to see the world is so important that you need to be in front of that audience. And so he started with a story like this. Hi, I'm Danny Avula. I went to University of Virginia. I befriended 6 gentlemen at University of Virginia that I fell in love with, and they fell in love with me. And we said, when we graduate, why would we move off to different cities and take different jobs? Why shouldn't we continue our life together? Why shouldn't we create more of this kind of community together? And so they bought 2 homes in a very broken down part of town, and they moved into them. And they lived there for 9 years, a group of 6 guys. And as they got married and had kids, if you had a lot of kids, you moved over to the bigger house. And if you didn't have any kids, you lived in the smaller house. But they lived together. They lived together. And he said, I want you to think deeply about this idea of being dependent over independent. Because in this world today, we're too independent of each other. We drive home into our garage, into our house, order from Rappi food to come to our door. We are so here that we're kind of alone together. We're very independent. We can kind of get through life and get through business, kind of being that thought leader and that person who prevails and has strength. But what I want you to think about is how you need to be more dependent on the idea of more people in the equation to build a community. And as I talk to you deeply and emotionally from the standpoint of how to think about the idea of unleashing the most potential in innovation in your business or your country, I want you to be dependent upon each other deeply and awkwardly. I want you to have an understanding of each other's stories and emotions and views and hopes and fears and realities to a level of intimacy that you have to depend on each other. Because if you don't, it won't work. Lin-Manuel Miranda, anyone familiar with that name? He's the creator of Hamilton, the blockbuster Broadway show in Manhattan that has literally reimagined the whole category of Broadway. He was the guy that said, I was in a room with him, about 12 of us, for a couple hours talking about his creating truly a global phenomenon. And I said, what was it as a result of this entire 5-year spectrum you're going to be on? He was making $500,000 a week. He was on the cover of every magazine in the US and around the world, and he was the new star. And I said, of all the things you've experienced and all the things you got to work through and be a part of as a part of this amazing experience from creating something amazing, what is it that will last with you on your last breath? And he said, simply working with people and trusting them and having empathy and compassion for each other and feeling as if we were doing something important together. That's what he said, not the $500,000, not being on the late night shows, not being on the cover of Time magazine or People magazine or your equivalent. It was none of those things. It was having empathy, compassion, and working collaboratively together on things that they thought were important for the world. I want you to raise the stakes on the work you do. If you think the work you're doing is this, I want you to move it to one step above that. If you think, let me just walk through, write these 3 words down. I'm bouncing around. Everybody okay? Anybody need anything? A waffle, a hamburger, a beer? Because Alejandro's team is amazing, and they will fulfill that, I'm sure. Everybody all right? Yeah? Give me like a yeah, if it's okay. Yeah. It's like church. Yeah! Yeah! So here's the 3 words I want you to write down on a clean sheet of paper. Words, W-O-R-D-S. Work, W-O-R-K, and way. And when Jeff Immelt, the CEO and chairman of General Electric, and Beth Comstock, the vice chairman, and I were together in Crotonville, their Learning Development Center, about 5 years ago, we were trying to break down what we thought was a culture. And what we thought a culture was broken down into 3 kind of big themes. One was the words that you use. The words that you use are the culture that you are. Words create the world. Words create the world. Deep intention, deep conscientious kind of understanding of what words you choose to use, what words you choose not to use. What words are we using now inside of our business and country and individually that may be the ones that are helping to catalyze innovation, and what words, just by virtue of the language, are preventing us from doing what we need to achieve. An amazing intentionality around the deliberate nature of what words we use. Secondly, is the work. If we think the work is this, we're probably wrong by a factor of about 5x. We need to imagine the work in service of something greater and bigger than ourselves. Something like Lin-Manuel Miranda said, working on something that we thought was important for the world. If you think it's a product or service or an offer to the world that you think the work is, that stake that you're working at is not high enough. I want you to consider what Simon Sinek says so deeply and so profoundly around, really, why are we doing this? And if we could think about the why more deeply and really dig into the more meaningful impact of the work we're doing, it might just raise the stakes in the consciousness and the intentionality and the passion of all of us. Because it's so easy to be right here and so easy to be in front of a computer, which I think is a terrible place to waste your life, by the way. Do not live in front of a computer. I've never had one. I have cards that I get to live out in the world and see the world and put notes on the cards of amazing people I meet and put their names and the location I met them and the temperature of the day that it was there and the location of the street corner, and that's the way I remember the world. I don't want to be down here in a computer. It's a terrible place to waste your life and a terrible place to create. It's awful. You must look at more to stuff and think about it harder. The words we use are important. The work we do needs to be elevated. And then the third one is the way we do it. When you walk into your organization or your enterprise, does it feel like a place you'd like to be if you didn't need to be there? Does the way, does the culture, does the behavior, does the nuances, does the feeling, does the emotion kind of emulate to a place where you actually would choose to be there if you didn't have to be there? And if it doesn't, you must be like Mother Nature and change the weather pattern. If it's a little cloudy, bring in a little sunshine. If it needs a little sprinkle on an April day just to bring a little freshness because it's getting a little stale, splash a little spring shower on it. You are the weatherman who changes the weather to make it better in the way. Here's what I'd like you to write down on a new sheet of paper. Are you guys okay with me just kind of pedantically taking you through this? I want you to write down on a new sheet of paper just a line. Just a line. And I want you to think about the way a second. So if my wife or my children were in front of me right now, I'd say, Grace and Lottie, what would be one of the ways that Dad describes, or you describe Dad's way? And they would say, definitely imperfect over perfect. He's definitely not shaven today. He definitely forgot his toothbrush and his toothpaste, and Alejandro's team had to go find one. He definitely showed up last night a little bit late and couldn't find the luggage at the airport because he's not very good at navigating that stuff. But it's okay because he believes that the world ought to be a little bit more imperfect because the perfect world is paralyzing. It's absolutely paralyzing, and it's a false debate. We can't be perfect. I am striving for my children to be the most imperfect children ever. Ever. I want them to have faults and fallacies and fear and pain and all the fun things and mess up as much as possible because living this perfect life is just a false debate and not an honest way of living life. I would say that I am imperfectly over perfect. What would be your this over that? A word over another word that you think would be the way, would be like a benchmark or a way that you ought to think that you ought to bring to your company? Would it be more ritual over ceremony? Would it be more conversation over presentation? Would it be sitting down and talking to people versus walking by them and just kind of saying, hey, great job, nice to see you. Hey, hope your day's been great, see ya. And you both walking away a bit shallow instead of sitting down with them and looking them in the eye. What would be your this over that? Write a word that's more important than the word over it. Take 2 seconds and do that. This is the way that you need to conduct yourself in order to have a temperament and a culture for innovating and creating. If you don't, you won't achieve it. What's your this over that? Give me one. Anybody?
For us, it's pardon over permission.
What is it?
Pardon over permission.
Pardon over permission. Perfect. What else? Yeah. Emotion over reasoning, right? We can reason it to death. And by the way, if you're working at a company of any stature, any legitimacy, which you all are, they've got all the processes and all the technologies and tools and compliance and regulation already taken care of. You're not going to fall through that crack. You're not working in not sophisticated businesses. You have all that as a backdrop to support you. You can have more permission to be more emotional on top because the reasoning will all happen behind you. Think about the words you use, the work you do, and the way you do it. So here's one I want you to think about also. So as I've kind of just, you should just be kind of looking at your notes and saying, like, what's resonating, what's feeling right, what could be the way I think about thinking about the way I think about innovation. And I also believe that you ought to think about in the context of, it's just life. It's really not that serious. And we need to lighten up. And we need to have some humor and some joy in it. And I went to Bug's Life years ago. Bug's Life, the first animated movie brought to you by Pixar. Who's seen it? Bug's Life. One of the 3 or 4 best animated films after Toy Story 3 and Zootopia. You got to see animated films. They're a joy. And so we're sitting there, and my dad, as a first-generation Serbian, made us sit in the theater, and when the movie was over, we had to stay there and clap through all the names and people's names and roster of people coming through, because my dad would say, well, Brad Pitt is not any more important than the person who got the catering, or the person who did the gaffer, or the person who did the lighting, or the legal for that. We must applaud them. And my dad was a very appreciative person. So here I am with my children, 13-year-old daughters. When that stuff's happening in a movie, they have to sit there awkwardly and be a little bit embarrassed. But now you know what they were doing with their friends? Making the moment it ought to be and appreciating someone because they did the hard work. Because innovating is hard work, and you need to thank them and congratulate them every time you have a chance to. And so we're doing it. And we're sitting there, and my dad and I are sitting there, and we're watching the slide go up, and all of a sudden I see one segment just as it's about to go black, and it says production babies. And there's about 20 women's names. So I call my client at Disney, and he calls his contact at Pixar, I said, I want to know what these production babies are. And he said, well, Andy, those are the people, the women, who had babies during the production of the film. And we wanted to honor them. And then even better is it's going to black. And the last thing, and the font is this big, right? It's that big, but then there's a font about this big, and it's just leaving the screen, and it said, filmed entirely on location. For those of you who get it, nudge the person next to you if they don't get it. Filmed entirely on location. So what's the location of an animated film? It's a little dark room with a bunch of people behind computers. There is no location. But what the guy wanted to do is bring a little seemingly senseless joy to the equation. Because in this thing that is called life and innovation and business and growth and change and ROI and P&L and balance sheets and shareholder value, we lose the fact that we need to bring some joy to this equation. So he said, I'm just going to put filmed in entirely location just for a little wink and a smile for me and my friends to laugh at, even if no one else gets it. You must insert a little bit of that into the equation. I was on, how do you pronounce the airline I was on last night? I want to say it correctly. Avianca. I was on Avianca last night, known for its innovation, known for its service, which was splendid, by the way. Loved it. And so I'm flying in, and every time I'm in a long flight, anything 4 hours or more, it always rolls through my mind. And it was years ago that I was sitting I was with a colleague, and we were so excited to get home that we were like doing dance steps in the terminal of the airport. We're like, and we're giving fashion shows, and we're walking around and kind of walking funny, making each other laugh. And we're seeing other people look at us as if we're kind of crazy and not very appropriate and very out of line and not very good for a proper place like an airport. And we weren't going to change because we were in that attitude. We were in that mood at that point. And so we get on the plane, and we're like, and we're having fun, we're giving high fives, and she's got a jelly bean in her nose, and we're having a great time. We had just done some work for Nike, so we're coming off some serious work. We needed to vent a little bit, right? Creating product for Nike was serious. We needed to have a laugh, and there we were. And I wrote down on a card just like this, and it said, social and non-social. So Avianca, you can take this idea, and you can reimagine the entire industry with this idea single, right? With this one idea. I think that when the person's loading the plane, they'll say, all the non-social people and all the people that are a bit introverted today and need a little bit of space, please load the plane now. And they all load onto the back of the plane, all the quiet people that just need to and they give them a sensory deprivation kit, and they put them in the back, and they have these beautiful little laid out beds, and they give them earmuffs and iPads and, eye things, and they kind of like let them very quiet, and then they seal it off. And then the lady says, and now I'd like to load all the social people on. And it's all the people that are like social and want to have a conversation, want to have a cocktail. And then you have all this really interesting kind of bifurcation around non-social and social. And then all of a sudden, JetBlue heard that idea, and JetBlue's exploring different demographic and psychographic ways of loading a plane as opposed to a functional way of doing it. Do it through an emotional state of mind, not a functional class of seat. So JetBlue's exploring. I can give you first right of refusal right now, but they're playing with it right now. But the idea was that I was being seemingly senseless. But is it seemingly senseless? It's not senseless at all. It might actually have some merit in the world. So create for joy and create for delivering something of joy. Years ago, I was at TED, and the Chris Anderson walked up and he said, hello everyone, last year we had Richard Gupta on the stage. And Richard Gupta is an amazing violinist, and he plays at the Philadelphia Philharmonic, but this year he brought a friend. And we don't often invite people back, but he was so good last year, we wanted to have him bring a friend back. And so he said, I've invited Josh Roman to join him, and Josh Roman is a 26-year-old cellist, 26. And so they walk out on the stage, and the two of them, Josh Roman sits, and Richard Gupta stands, and he's playing his violin, and there is Josh Roman, 28 years old, 26 years old, 26, 28, playing that cello. And for 12 minutes, we in this room were captivated, and there was an emotional moment that we all experienced that we couldn't articulate. They played the classics from Beethoven and Bach and otherwise, and it was the most beautiful 12 minutes. And Chris Anderson walked up on the stage, and he said, I don't know really how to tell everyone what just happened because it was such an emotional moment. Josh and Richard, what happened? And Richard looked at Josh, the 20-odd-year-old, and said, go ahead and tell him. So Josh stood up with his cello and said, hi, I'm Josh Roman. I'm the cellist from Philadelphia. And when I was told that I was going to be playing in front of TED audience, I wanted to bring my best. And knowing that if you could be inspired, You might be inspiring to the world. Please write that down. If you're inspired, you can be inspiring. What sources and avenues are you getting enough and more inspiration in your life in order to you be inspiring to the world? Get inspired to be inspiring. And he said, if I want to inspire you, then to go and inspire all the people that you touch, there could be a pretty magnificent ripple effect. And so what I did was instead of bringing my cello, which is a fine cello, I brought this cello. And it's a 450-year-old Stradivarius that's worth 17 million US dollars. And on this stage left is Lloyd's of London, the insurance people who travel with it. And on stage right is the armed security guard that travels with it as well. But what I wanted to do was have all that was created and intended with this cello 450 years ago, the person who made it, with his hands in carving it, and then all the hundreds of people that have played these same exact songs through this cello, and the people that wrote those songs, Bach and Beethoven and other, and I wanted it all to flow into you. Because if you could be inspired, you could be inspiring to the world. And so I want you to think about who is your Josh Roman at your company that's waiting to be unleashed with that level of intention and vision and articulation of doing something magnificent. Who is that person? You can name them by name. You can name them in this room. But who are the people in your company that are those people, mostly sometimes young and not often young, but old as well, that have that level of intentionality, conviction, passion, and want to bring something magnificent to the world? These are the intangibles. It's not the intangibles. Process, product, infrastructure, technology, must have. But if we unleash the potential of the people that have all this pent up inside of them, therein lies the difference. So I want you to think about this for a second. So how, when we're here, there's this line that I mentioned earlier that we're kind of alone together, right? Like I was texting Jill last night, my wife, and I'm kind of alone, but I'm together with her because I'm texting with her in Virginia. And so it's this alone together. And there's this beautiful artist named Marina Abramovich. Anyone familiar with Marina Abramovich? I have a special penchant for her. She's a Serbian kind of social experiment artist, and she's done crazy things like walk the length of the Great Wall to meet her boyfriend and then break up with him. And that was their last moment they saw each other after walking from end to end and meeting and hugging and then leaving each other. She's a social experiment artist that brings enormous emotion and conviction and intention to the world. And she was just around New York watching the number of people that were alone together. And she said, it just doesn't feel right. We must be more connected. And so what she did was, well, let me just tell you what she did, and then I'm going to have you do it. She walked through MoMA, which a friend of mine, Paola Antonelli, the curator of modern design at MoMA, is a friend, and so Paola was telling me the story. And Paola said, I'm walking through the space in the gallery, a room about the size of this at MoMA in New York City, and it's a blank room, blank canvas room, nothing's in it. And Paola says, so this is your canvas. You have this to use over the next 90 days, however you'd like to use it. And Marina said, yeah, that feels right. And she went off into the wings behind in the curtain, and she brought out 2 folding chairs, and she put them in the middle of the room. And she said, Paola, I think this is all I need, because what I'd like to do over the next 90 days is just connect with people. And Paola said, with all the resources we have, and this is MoMA, for the next 90 days, that you just need 2 folding chairs, and that's all you need? And she said, yeah, I think that's it, because what I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to pair up with a person, and I want you to redirect your body so that you can look in their eye directly. Do it now. Pair up with a person, pair up with a person, pair up with a person, pair up with a person. If you don't have one, do a 3-way if you have to. I want you to move your bodies a little bit to kind of adjust to it, kind of get into it. Or do you have a partner? There you go. And what I'd like you to do, you know how kids have staring contests and they don't blink, and you know how the kids will look at each other and try to make each other laugh? This is not a staring contest or a blink contest or a laugh contest. I want you to quietly for 1 minute, look in this person's eyes and feel them. On your mark, go. No talking. Shh. 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 And stop. So who has a new crush? These guys kind of warmed up to each other, I gotta say. I mean, it's, they look very distinguished and very well dressed and manicured, but they kind of got into it a little bit. We all do, and we all do that. You know why? Because we don't have time. And what Marina Abramovich said at the result of 90 days, which was, by the way, thousands of people. She sat in front of 15,000 people. People waited up to 7 hours in the day in a line at MoMA to look into her eyes for a minute because they don't get connected to, and we don't get connected to. And as we think about the intangibles that are the tangibles that drive the growth and the propensity for growth and innovation and change at companies in a world and a country like Colombia, it's deep connection. Because the world is making us too fast, we must slow down and put humanity, empathy, and compassion in this idea. That is the difference. You will be supported with all the formal things and all the tangible things you need because you work at amazingly strong, rich, stable companies. I want you to think about the power of three. So I go to Denmark regularly, and I'm on the board of a school there called Chaos Pilots. And the Chaos Pilots are a social innovation university, and Uffe Elbæk was a street performer in Copenhagen, and he saw how people interacted with him, and he thought he could bring that level of development to students. 30 years later, this university is an amazing university, the equivalent of an MBA or a graduate degree, and there's 90 students who go through it, and it's simply beautiful in terms of the model they created. And so when I started as a board member, I had to get to know it, and I said, so your professors, we don't have professors. 4 years, we don't have 4 years. 2 years, not 2 years, but 3 years, and we have coaches. And all they coach the kids on are three things. The first year is to think about something of magnitude. Think about something of magnitude and has significant impact on the world. One, an entire year of thinking about this. An entire year of thinking about this. The second year, the coaches coach them on, now design for it. Design what you may do, the levers you might pull, the people you might meet, etc., to bring that to life. Design, right? Design thinking and design. Be thoughtful on all the things you might have to do to kind of get that done. Oh, and the third year is just bring it to life. Put it in the world. And so as a board of director, I take on students as mentors, but it's actually one of those reverse where I learn more from them than they from me. And it's a Sunday night after working with Michael, one of the students. He got a match with me because we're both soccer fans. And it was a Sunday night driving home from the beach. I remember my kids were asleep in the back. Jill's asleep here. I answer the phone. It's whatever time in Denmark. And I answer it, and it's an unknown number. And it says, hello? Hello, Andy, it's Michael. It's Michael. You must fly to Greenway next week immediately. Next week, you must be in Greenway. And I was like, what's happening? What's happening? He said, remember how 3 years ago when I said that Tibet ought to have a FIFA-sanctioned soccer team because of its political and geopolitical connection to China, and how I thought the Tibetans, who have this amazing joy and spirit in them, could be fulfilled and more enriched by virtue of a soccer program? Remember how I said that and how we worked for a year on it? And then the second year you told me that I needed a design for it, and so I said I need to meet with the Dalai Lama. He's 21, by the way. And I need to meet with FIFA in Lucerne, Switzerland, and all those things, and he did, and he did, and he did. Oh, Andy, you're my mentor, and so I want you to be the person, the honorary captain, who comes out and puts the ball on the ground in Greenway, because Greenway and Tibet are going to play a friendly in a FIFA-sanctioned game. I did it. 22. 90 stories like that every day that are changing the world because they're working from a place of the work isn't this, the work is this. They've elevated their profile around their impact and their role in the world. And if we work at a product or service company, that does not dismiss you or forget you from the idea of raising the stakes on the work one level of stratosphere, because it's the magnitude of impact you have on the people in the world, not the product and services you sell. You're in service of the world and the people of the world when you create, not just product and service for return on investment. You're creating for the world, and why would you make things that aren't of that worthiness and of that significance and that beauty and that joy, like Josh Roman so depicted? So I go to a coffee shop in Richmond when I'm in town. It's called World Cup. And you know, the coffee shops always have a bulletin board, and it's like roommate needed or drummer needed or whatever it might be. Well, I was sitting there by myself, journaling one morning, and I had my chai, and I'm sitting, and I'm going off, and I'm having a great morning, and all of a sudden I was like paralyzed with what I saw on the wall, and paralyzed in joy, and like, I love this person, because this person, this is good. This person put this on the wall, and it's been well-traveled. It's all full of tape now, and it's kind of well-traveled, but it says on it, free strips of paper may be used for bookmarks, writing down his or her phone number, a healthy snack, litter, or even a place to put your bubble gum or boogers. And then it had little strips coming off it. I love this person. I want them to marry my children. I want them to meet them. I want to empower them. This person is my inspiration because they are an anonymous hero. They are an anonymous hero putting joy in the world. Ironically or serendipitously or other, on the back, right? The font, really small. When the people in the world love one another, then the strong will not oppress the weak, the many will not oppress the few, and the wealthy will not mock the poor. So get into this kid. Was it a girl or a boy? A lot of girls say it was the girls say it was a boy. No, the boys say it was a girl because girls would have put their name on it for credit, right? So there's all this kind of stuff going on with it. But were they writing a term table that was very important? They said, you know what? I need a little seemingly senseless and a little joy in the world, and so I got to bring it. And so they did this, and they marched down. They printed it, thought it, printed it, marched down to the coffee shop, put it up, and then they walked away and they said, this is so good. I love this. And I hope someone else loves it. And I really don't give a damn if no one else does, because it's really good stuff. Put joy in the world. Put joy in the world and have that intellectual irreverence. Intellectual irreverence, a little joy and a little serendipitous and a little spontaneity and a little bit of in it. And if you don't, it's just going to be flat and commodity and the same as everybody else's. I love this person. At Google, they have something. I worked with Andy Burnt for years. He's the Google Creative Lab director. And Sergey and what's his other guy? Sergey and Brin? Sergey and... Thank you. The two founders of Google said, we're growing at a rate that we can't explain. We need to have a Google Creative Lab. We have no idea what the Google Creative Lab is, but we have two criteria. And so they cherry-picked Andy Burnt, who was my client in an ad agency, and said, Andy, we'd like you to run the Google Creative Lab. And Andy and I met in an 8th Avenue, New York City coffee shop for about 9 months, trying to figure out how to create and construct a design that was in service of the two criteria that Larry and Sergey gave us as criteria for creating the Google Creative Lab. The two criteria were simply this: only create in the Google Creative Lab things that will affect 1 billion people or more. If it doesn't affect 1 billion people or more, don't work on it. We've got it covered at Google. Only 1 billion or more, which would include things like what? Famine, right? And systemic global issues like that. And the second thing is we want you to do is just make us not Google. Make us not Google. Like, take us off that path of ad revenue coming off clickable searches. Make us not Google. So we tussled and toyed, and we worked hard to get to that idea of how to construct for it. And it was hard until a young man literally scootered by at Andy's office, and he said, hey, Mr. Burnt, I know you and Andy are working on that whole Google structure and how to get the Google Creative Labs going, but I think it's really just a few things that I think you ought to think about, because they're in the form of what we call Googly, an informal, unspoken kind of frame. I want you to write these 4 things down. Number 1 is believe in something. Believe in something. Deep belief. Conviction. Deep belief. Believe in something. Number 2 is what 2 to 3 things will help bring that belief to life. Not 10, not 20, not 5. What 2 to 3 things would you do, strategies, activities, events, people, things, to make sure that that belief has the most chance for success? Number 3 is, how do you put as many resources, articulated, unarticulated, easy, hard, into those 2 to 3 things to make sure they're fully resourced, that there's no chance for failure? And number 4 is, in a very democratic Google way, invite the world to participate. How much of a closed loop do we have in the models we're working on, where if we open the loop, we might just have Josh Romans and the free paper person and others come in with an idea that transforms it all. Believe in something, 2 to 3 things, resource them perfectly, and 4, invite the entire world in a very messy way to be democratically involved and all engage in it. Inspire them. My last quick thought. Denmark, years ago, I'm at the Moleskine, it's a bed and breakfast. I'm waiting on the Chaos pilots after a late Saturday night, and they drank too much, and I was the responsible one, and it was 9 o'clock, we were supposed to meet on a Sunday morning, it was 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, and got to be noon, and I was sitting there waiting on the kids to come down to work on something called Inspiration Suitcase, and I was just kind of getting kind of lost in the beauty of what was going on in this beautiful bed and breakfast in Denmark, and over on the piano, the Steinway piano, was this beautiful silver chafing bowl, and it had a Veuve Clicquot champagne bottle in it, with shaved ice in it, and 8 champagne flutes beautifully orchestrated around the champagne bowl. And I walked up to the maitre d' finally after condensation and water had been falling on it, and no one had cracked the champagne, but it had been on ice since 8:45 when I was there 3 hours later. And I walked up to him and I said, "What is it? What is it that you have on? What's the celebration?" He said, we have no determined celebration, but we're always ready to celebrate 24/7, 365. We're always ready to celebrate because you must celebrate the moment to make the moment it needs to be. How are we celebrating Colombia's Medellin's #1 status? How have we celebrated, and how might we celebrate it more to get more out of that great piece of asset and that piece of article and piece of story you have? And how do we celebrate more the people that work for you? And how do we celebrate more the beautiful place that is Colombia about all the people that are creating? How do we celebrate, and how can we do it more? Because we're not doing it, I bet, enough. Even in a Latin American company that knows how to celebrate. We're not doing it enough. Joel Klein writes for Time magazine, and Joel Klein is a prolific writer, and I want to share this last thought with you because I think it's a really important one. This think card is tattered. It's 15 years old. It's the original. It was New Year's Day. Jill had gone off to this market to get some food. I was laying on the couch. I'm reading the Joel Klein article that he wrote about George Clooney. George Clooney is the guy that every boy wants to have a beer with and every girl wants to date, right? Or every boy wants to date, it doesn't matter. He's for everybody. And he's that guy that we all love, right? He's just a good guy. He seems like a good guy. And so Joel Klein knew we wanted to do an article on him. George Clooney doesn't do a lot of press like that. George liked his writing so much, he called Joel Klein and said, "Hey, Joel, why don't I come to your house on Friday night and you interview me and you can make me dinner and we have a good meal and you interview me?" And Joel took the call and hung up, and he was like, "Holy shit, George Clooney's coming to my home on Friday night. What do I wear? What do I make? This is so exciting." This is how verbatim the article reads that Joel Klein wrote about his experience that evening. It's 6:45 on a Saturday night, not Friday, when the doorbell rings. A little late, Clooney hit traffic, his assistant called to say, on his way back from visiting his girlfriend in Vegas. He's wearing faded jeans, black laced-up boots, zip-up sweater, and he looks a lot less like a movie star than a normal, unbotoxed, 46-year-old unmarried guy coming over for dinner. But he also looks like he's excited to be there because wherever he is, George Clooney's also there. Oh, that's some good language. But he also looks like he's excited to be there because wherever he is, George Clooney's also there. And I wrote down swagger, confidence, have it. Your world can change the world. What do you do? How do you do it? And why do you do it? It wasn't a confidence and a swagger of overconfident and kind of ruin the moment. He just has this amazingly quiet confidence, and he walks in and says, "The room's better because I'm here." And I think you guys have that opportunity to do that in this country. It's better because we're here with that kind of swagger and attitude. And so with that, I thank you immensely, but I want to not kind of go into the next thing without bringing on the people that have really done some amazing work. Innovation All-Stars from Colombia. Alejandro is going to introduce them, but we're going to bring them up to the stage and have a conversation. But what I want from you guys is to look at your notes and think about the 2 to 3 things that help you thinking about the topic of innovation with the intangibles, because those are the difference. I promise you, in 25 years, stick a stake in me, I can bet the fact that that's the difference in doing this kind of work. Thank you guys, and I really love being with you guys.
Hello. Thank you, Andy. So,
I didn't want the applause. I want the applause for these guys right here. Or you can give me a standing ovation at any point. You're ready. I mean, any point.
We have the best part coming up. We want to put in context in Colombia how innovative we are from academia, from entrepreneurial efforts. We invite to the Senator Ivan Duque, passionate innovation, author of The Orange Economy, Santiago Aparicio, an executive from Rappi, the application that is bringing us many things home. Andres Waldraff, Director of Innovation of Avianca, who's been doing great things in Avianca, and Dr. Ernesto Lucena, the Dean in Innovation of Sergio Arboleda University, and Dr. Álvaro González, VP, Marketing VP of Coordinadora Logistics Group. The dynamics is going to be, Andy is going to be the moderator of this small forum. You are going to interact. Remember that Andy is going to give the special edition of his book. One of the winning chairs at the end is gonna take this book for his company, and let's enjoy this event that we're going to extend ourselves 30-35 minutes.
Are you thinking about as a result of the last hour? What one word? Say it. Confidence. What else? Inspiration. What else? Playful. What's that? Deep belief. Joy. Imperfect. God, imperfect is so good. Bring it to your children. What's that? Empathize. Thank you, guys. How do we like? Is this handsome or what? That's a lot of handsome. So here we go. Should we take it away? All right. George, you're in my ear.
I hope I am. Testing 1, 2, 3. Andy is gonna ask them 2 questions. He's gonna ask them 2 questions to each one of them. It begins in the order there, clockwise. You can ask 2 questions to the panel, and the audience then is going to ask a question, and then we play it by ear in the following 35 minutes. So go ahead, ask the questions.
Before we start, your one word for the last hour? The one word that you're thinking about?
I was thinking in strategy.
Soul.
Alma.
Happiness. Experimentation. Spoken only like 5 really distinguished men white. So, Ivan, the first question. Ready? This is huge. So you're the author of a great book called The Orange Economy, which I have not read, which I will on the ride home. And what does the orange economy mean, and what opportunities does it mean for Colombia?
Well, the book of The Orange Economy talks about a sector in a country like Colombia is larger than coffee, is larger than mining, and which are creative industries. We're talking about legacy festivals, carnivals, visual arts, scenic arts, performance art, the media, architecture, advertising as functional creations. And it's a sector that is overlooked, that has never ever had any starring role in the development of agenda. And when we said we're going to make a book to tell this story, the first thing that we thought about was, in terms of innovation, we're going to make a book of economics, that people can read it in a pool and don't feel that they're reading about economics, that can enjoy it with their pina coladas. And we decided to do it without paragraph. Just a totally flowing book, different book. We're going to tell the story with infographics, make it fun with videos, interaction. And we had to face an institution, those that manage policy were very uninnovative. And I remember that my colleague Felipe Huitrago, that when decided to make the book to tell the story, the first challenge we had is how do I don't go through the editorial committee, because they're going to block everything. They're going to say no. So I call a lady I called the lady that managed the area of publications, but at the lowest level, and I had helped her with innovation of the library. And I said, Mirta, what do I have to do to get this thing through? I said, look, the only thing that you don't need, that doesn't need to go through a committee is a manual. Okay, let's make it a manual. It's a manual. It's not a book. Just as long as it doesn't go through a committee. And it came out in October the 13th this year. And today is the bestseller, more downloaded in the Inter-American Development Fund, with more than 200 downloads translated to Indonesian, Greek, English, Spanish. We're going to Portuguese and Chinese. That lesson, it gives innovation lesson. First, don't fear to fail. Fundamental, don't fear to fail. Because to make such a disruptive book always has fears. No, this is not going to work. There was no fear. Second, we were very convinced, you said it, Andy, conviction. We were convinced about the story. Third, teamwork, opening up, democratic. All the pieces and bits are part of a team, not any one. We all participated in the construction of every detail. And fourth, to tell the story with passion. When the book came out, how we began to tell the story, for me, was a satisfaction, enormous. I'm passionate about it today. 3 years later, after launching the book, there's 19 countries in Latin America that are making policy for the orange economy in their countries, that kept the word, that rang a bell, and that we put on the table. And the other thing that I've always remembered as a story, I left my position in the bank to come back to Colombia and to be in the Senate, and and we have a debate here at the university. A lady had invited to the debate, it was an Indian leader, and she said, for example, you, sir, you don't have no idea about the orange economy. Orange Economy is a book that was published by the IDB, and she started to talk about it. She started about it as if she owned it. And I understood that day, because I said, look, I'm the author. And she couldn't believe it. Maybe because I had a tie. I couldn't. And that day I understood about what you said on the democracy. When you do things and you do it with passion, there's another out there that uses them, owns them, and fills them with passion, is because things that are innovative belong to everybody and not to the maker. That is the lesson.
Drink it with a pina colada at a pool, but I'm going to treat it on the flight. So you guys think
I'll
about
send you a copy with a pina colada.
Done. Think about the disruption in that, and think about the word that I haven't even used when I was asked his one word, which was soul. Delivering it with soul and empathy and compassion and conviction and inspiration, and not rigor and process and structure and architecture and all the words that we sometimes so easily gravitate to when it thinks about innovation or growth of a company. It was more the intangibles than it was the tangibles that seems like the success behind that. Sounds perfect. And the world ought to incorporate that as well. Thank you. So we have an entrepreneur on the stage who's seen some quite crazy fast growth in the last 14 months. So Santiago, and with Rappi app, and you guys know Rappi? Yeah? Do we love Rappi? Are we taking Rappi global? Brought to you by Colombia? Yeah? So Rappi is considered one of the most innovative apps in LATAM. How did it start, and how do you plan to make this innovative app sustainable from now to 5 years, and even beyond 5 years? What's your plan?
Very well. More than anything, this is a story that has no fiction, no geniuses behind it at all. No, there's no geeks or genius. Rappi simply was born in the park in Bogota, the Viroy Park, a couple of blocks from here, with 4 guys that wanted to deliver donuts to the inhabitants of the park, and with a vision.
I think.
Exactly.
Right? 4 guys wanting to deliver donuts. Yeah, totally logical.
And with a vision of really closing the delivery to immediate, to have real immediacy, which didn't exist. What did we learn very, very quickly? That you don't have to have immense resources. Sometimes you just have to be thinking in not planning too much, but execute more doing. And Andy asked a very interesting question. How are we going to make this sustainable into the future? The reality is that the secret ingredient is becoming comfortable, being uncomfortable. If being out of the comfort zone is being uncomfortable for us intentionally. We have 14 months of being born, and people in the company, when we went to Silicon Valley, they didn't understand why we continued growing if really there was no established process at all. But the reality of the issue is that as we can be comfortable, being uncomfortable, and make it the normal, taking risks every day, all day long, the lesson that we have to give you for the world, for the Silicon Valley funds and venture capital funds to invest in Latin America like they've done in Rappi. You have to execute more. Do more. It is only done with the courage of not waiting for financing, not even having plans or prospects, but a very clear vision, yes, and executable steps that can be developed in one day. In one day. What do I do every single morning? I study 3 things I can develop that day and do that day. Then when I'm washing my teeth and brushing I can read them and say, this put me one step forward to that large vision that we have in Rappi. So the invitation to you is as simple as that. Execute more. And how are we going to make it sustainable? Andy asks. We know we're going to be very uncomfortable because we are uncomfortable now. Good.
It's the only comfort, right? Nicely put. And congratulations on that amazing rocket ride. And you're just beginning, you know that, right? Alejandro, did you want me to take something from the crowd? These guys are so distinguished, I hate to waste myself on... You can take a book. It's a good doorstop. Anyone? And if not, we'll jump right back to these guys. Yes?
Why orange? Why orange? That word orange, that story is it's a lot of fun. It's very funny. Actually, I'm going to tell you the motivation around the name. When we want to make the book, the first thing I was telling my colleague Felipe Huitrago, the co-author, is, hey, listen, how would such a creative sector doesn't have a color that identifies such a creative... I said, Huitrago, okay, let's make this book, but let's give it a chromatic identity. You're gonna go on Friday for your home. I go on Friday, we'll see. On Monday, we'll define what is the color. And so, but why that obsession with color? I said, look, my mother, I remember my mom when I was in university, she had a bunch of books which were called the Mao's Red Book, which no one ever read, but the Mao's Red Book was somewhere in the library. So on Monday, we arrived at the job, and I said, what color did it came out? I said, orange. And I said, oh gosh, orange too. But why? And so we began to find things, such magical things like this. In Egypt, the Toms used a pigment to illustrate the parties, which is called the Regalgar color. In Egypt, we found that the Toltec Indians used orange pigment to illustrate their parties too, and their celebrations. We found that there was a god, a classical god, which was Bacchus, which used orange as a color of connection with inspiration. In the chakra in India, the chakras inspiration is orange. Hallow seed from Halloween is orange. And Frank Sinatra used to say, I'd take a trip to Bogota, flight, I'd say a guy, so long hair, hippish, with my book, and I go to him and I say, hey dude, try to blend in, hey, well, how about the book? He said, hey dude, you know what, it's so cool, it's awesome dude. Started to talk in his, and with a passion, you couldn't believe it. And he said, why orange? And he started to tell me a story. Hey, I said, when I finished, he said, hey, dude, I'm one of the authors. And he looked at me, no, you're kidding. Come on. Just to tell you that the most elementary thing that we were saying, that it was the most simple thing, which was to give the identity, chromatic identity, was what allowed it to relaunch. And today, when we talk about orange color in culture, is something already generating identity. And I feel very, very proud of having participated in this project. And Andy's book is orange, by the way, too. Just in case, it's orange. It's orange. Very curious, yeah, really, because our color is very similar, and the story is not so. I mean, it's not so apotheosic. It's not such a. But we got to Silicon Valley, and these guys started to say that we had chosen a Pantone color, which had the longest wavelength, that the attention span was super intrinsic. So, wow, gee, really? Very scientific. Justified why the color of Rappi, which is that color. What in reality, the truth of the matter is that we had 12,000 pesos to buy to buy the jacket, and that's the money we had. That's the color that was there. That's it. That's the reality of it. It was not that side. I killed the guy. We just had 12 bucks. That's the money we had, and that's the color was available. That was available. So as you all know, it's a color which is very popular for transit and traffic in Colombia and cheap. So that's the real truth. But I'm happily, but the wavelength, the wavelength and all that stuff is nice for marketing.
Is that what, a byproduct of necessity sometimes? Nicely put. So let's jump over to Andres. And so you can, are you going to take the social, non-social idea, or are you going to let that, we're going to jump over here, right? So are you going to take that idea, or should JetBlue take it? Do you want it, or?
We'll experiment with it.
We're going to experiment with the idea. I want to experiment with the idea, which is, we know whether introverted or extroverted, don't worry. The way, Andy, remember the dining example yesterday, so you can talk a little slower. This is just for you from translation.
Question from the group is, what is innovation for the airline industry, topical to the question we were just talking about, and which are the biggest challenges for the next 10 years? So where are we going, and where are we going innovation-wise?
We don't believe that innovation is necessarily different for an airline or for another company. We don't necessarily, I know that there's some people out there that worked with me in the past, but all of innovation has to do with they're going to be run, if you're going to go run, fail fast and fail cheap. Fail fast and fail cheap. Fail fast and fail cheap. Innovation basically is a path where I feel where I'm gonna feel okay. I have to eliminate a sensation of bothering and be comfortable to walk from a point to another. I have to solve a series of ambiguities, a certain series of uncertainties that don't allow me to walk from point A to point B. And the work of innovators is basically to clear these uncertainties and unblock these obstacles. In the past, if you look how a company, especially a large company, works, we are used to bring experts, bring top gurus that have 10, 15, 30 years in the field, that are the top notch of doing the same. We're talking about innovation, we need people that are not doing the exact same thing. Some people that are doing new and different things, that's what we need. The way in which we recruit people, we bring these experts, yes, and how does it work in a company, the expert has an idea. He gets someone that does PowerPoint. PowerPoint is brought to the board of directors, the approval committee, or the steering committee, and then all the resources are poured so that the project is executed. During the execution of the project, we find, we forgot this, we forgot that, we didn't consult legal, we forgot to ask the user whether he really wanted to have it, etc., etc. It's a tortuous, zigzagging path of reviewing all these famous uncertainties, but on the execution and pouring millions and millions and millions into it. But in Avianca, what we're trying to do is exactly the same, but doing much faster and cheaper. Much faster and cheaper. So we're going to get rid of these uncertainties before pouring millions to buy what we have to buy, to eliminate the syndrome, the new rich, the new hillbilly rich. Don't put money into it, just put a little more brains and brain. We have to break away from egos and leaders and egos, because we need to propose solutions that in the end of the day, ultimately we have to validate again. In Avianca, I'm talking a little bit more closer to Avianca's case. What happened with Avianca? Just to go through our story. Avianca decided to change its purpose, its reason to be, its corporate purpose. We were an airline, yes, which was based in essence around what are the planes we buy. The most important asset we had were planes in the past, and we were based, all the tactics, all the organization was around our planes. Had to do with what aircraft we're going to buy. That's it, and not the customer. And today, what we know, and after the financial crisis, we know that really, if you want to really be sustainable this time, you have to worry about the customer experience, to attract them, to maintain them, to pamper them, to keep them. So what Avianca decided, Avianca changes completely its leadership, brings a person that comes from the world of technology or from IT, Mr. Hernan Rincon. And Hernan, the first sentence he says is, now we are a technology company that, by the way, has people in aircraft being transported. By the way, and it changes the entire internal dynamics completely. Complete change of leadership at the top. It was a total revamp, and we're setting up again from the customer experience. We're rebuilding the whole company, then through processes that in principle we hope that they're digital, because the most valuable customers in terms of the money they bring to the company still today are the people that are in the digital world today. And afterwards, and the last thing we'll do has to do with what is the technology we need to use to fly the damn planes. So the first thing is thinking in the customer. So our biggest challenge the next 10 years is how to turn in reality this new design we have for the customer.
When you think about your flights and the flights that you take, or when you hear about people who experience a flight, it's not often the big things that they're talking about. It's not the weather pattern in the East Coast affecting their ability to take off or not. It's they looked me in the eye, or they shook my hand, and last night the pilot on the way out of my flight that landed at 10:50 or something, he was standing in the cockpit, and the people were coming out the door, and I kind of said thank you, and I don't know if he took that as I wanted to talk to him, but he extended his hand, and I shook his hand, and I was feeling bad about the people behind me, but I also felt like I connected at a very human level with that place called Avianca. And in my first experience, it's probably the only thing that's significantly going to stand out from my experience from all the other airlines I fly every day around the world, was that moment of humanity when the person reached his hand out and said, "Thank you for flying," in his own language. But it's the small that is the big. So if there's anything else you might write down around what I took from that, was it's the small that is the big inside the journey in the customer experience. Thank you for that. So we have a question. Yes, please.
Yeah, specifically how Avianca is innovating to face the boom of low-cost airlines, the low-fare airlines that is permeating Latin America. That the first decision is we don't want to be a low-cost airline. We don't want to be that. From then on, how are we going to innovate? Innovation, it doesn't happen because a person like Andres or his team has any ideas. The ideas are out there. All of our employees, our customers, our business partners, consultants, etc., they're out there. Ideas, there's lots of ideas, almost free. There's so many actually that we are actually sort of overwhelmed by the scope of it all. We have too many ideas. We have to funnel them. But the problem is how to execute. Innovation, he has enemies all over the place in an organization. The CFO says, no, are you going to spend the money? The CFO says, that doesn't have the yield, it doesn't produce money in the next 15 days. True. The innovation accounting requires different mathematics, more innovative and creative mathematics, different mathematics. There are leaders that start to say, why are you going to change my chip? Because, I had thought, what are you changing at all? But all of this is part of this cycle of validation that I was talking about. We have to go through all the company to grasp and capture all these constraints that our system has. What constraints are constraints are important? As Andy said in the conference, as Andy said, and other people have said this too, the moment where you're more creative is when you're up against the wall. The more constraints you have, the more creative you become. The sentence of thinking out of the box, I turn it around and say it's better to think inside the box. Inside the box, you don't know what to do when you're against the wall. And then you have the idea. But how are we innovating? Well, the center of innovation for us, it doesn't have to be for all, but for us in Avianca is the customer experience. We have to change the customer experience. We have to ensure, and we've thought a lot about in the digital, that the information that the customer needs has to be where the customer needs it, when he needs it. It happens to us, for example, that the passengers realize before the person that is in the counter that the flight is going to be delayed, because Google lets them know. They go to the counter already knowing, and the clerk has no information, hasn't got the information yet. So our system is not so nimble, is not so fast under that. So what is the first reaction of the customer? We're being deceived. This guy doesn't, Bianca is lying because they already know, because if I know, they should know, but they don't. So they think they're lying to us. So, but the person in the counter doesn't get it yet. We haven't closed the loop and the fast information so that it's when he has to get there. So that's, if you want to ask me what's the focus, is to try to get the information fast in whoever needs it, when they need it, where they need it, as they need it. It doesn't matter, you have to go by voice, whatever, but they need to get the information as soon as possible.
So I want to move on to, let's go to Ernesto, since we're moving this way. So Ernesto, from Sergio, thank you very much. And you gave it to me earlier, but I didn't want to mess it up too bad on the stage. So just from a university standpoint, when we talked about the ecosystem, it's a country, it's a society, it's a group of entities that kind of organize around how to grow itself as a rising tide. And the university kind of setting or environment is a massive influence on that. So the question would be, what is the role of the university on creating that innovative culture in society? So I think another way maybe just is, what's the imprint the university hopes to have and desires to have in terms of its influence on all that we're talking about? And that's a huge question, but it's significantly important to the time.
It's a very complex question. I'm going to try to summarize it in the following words. First thing, we all have a story behind us. And I believe that with the examples that we've said here on the conference, and this conference, what you realize is that every one of the individuals that is right here and is in Colombia, that is in the universities, has a story behind. And none is better than the other or worse than the other. All these stories, all these narratives and stories in universities, what we're trying to is decipher the dimension and the scope. What do I mean by this? Today in neuroscience and neurobiology studies, we have found that the emotional intelligence is maybe the most important thing that we have to work in students, in pupils, and in companies. If we have these as a clear light, the change is coming up soon. When these stories that we all have, professors, in the case of universities, teachers, leaders in companies understand this, innovation begins to sprout spontaneously, because in places of work and places of study begin to become nicer, relaxed places where you want to be. Places when we are in moments of tranquility, a little bit going to the reflection that in moments of crisis, but also there are moments of tranquility and emotion. When we inspire human beings, the university, what it does is to open up these spaces in a new pedagogical model, is to tell students that they have to believe in themselves, they have to be leaders of themselves first. Leaders, so we've spent hundreds of years in academics rewarding generally the students of A+. A+ students, but the rest of the humanity, what about them? World has been transformed by A+ students. Come on, my personal story. I was no A+ student at all. I was not in university. I was just an average student. Average. Slightly imperfect. Not slightly. In a big way, perfect, with a family story, with a family behind of many parallel things, which were very imperfect, as Andy said, but I fortunately had people, and as we call them, angels or mentors around that invested in that a human being changed or evolved. That's what we have to look for in academia and in companies, because remember, we are emotional beings that we learn to think evolutionary. We're not rational beings, naturally. When we are told generally the typical admonishment in a company or in the classroom is leave your emotions behind. Here you come to think and to work. It's impossible to leave them. You're part of them. Evolutionary, no. So the change of paradigm in teaching, in research, in companies, in the human resources and HR is an understanding the story of that human being behind it. When Andy began his conference, he begins maybe with the best story and the most important story for his life. That is, could be his wedding and surely his daughters and I've always said that when we do something nice, go back to your family, go back to your roots, see how you educate your children, and behave like that in your company. And that's the model and the paradigm we're trying to imprint in universities. Our education has to go align with emotion of course, techniques of professions have to be there, of course. But we cannot leave aside that the great breaking point of our society and the world is in understanding the dimensions of the human being, specifically the emotional dimension.
Thank you. So Alvaro, so let's move on to, in the world that you're in at Coordinadora, right? Is that, yes? It's full of dynamics. And so as we ask you this question around the strategies, which are the strategies you have that design to make the company the top innovative company? What have you done from a design standpoint, and an intention standpoint, and an architecture standpoint to yield or produce such innovation? Some examples.
Yeah, we're going to try to see as a transportation industry, quote unquote, more not traditionally thought as innovative when we reach innovation because of tiredness. Because when we reach those steering committees and the support group, we were concentrated on a whole day, an entire day, to work on service and expansion and growth and resources. How to of course have our assets and we understood this by inertia. And the transportation had to go beyond. And we understood that Coordinadora was a company that was called for transportation to be seen differently, from a different angle, not just from the sender and the receiver and the parcel and the package and the final destination. No, actually, that's what we have to do, and it is the core. We haven't gone away from it, but we understood that we had to give the additional dimension. We have to understand this beyond the sender and much later than of the receiver. And we started to think in a country where we have approximately 1 million companies, where 90% are SMEs, 86% are micro, less than 10 employees. And this makes us think that they needed another type of support and transportation. And the examples that I want to give you, when we started to look at the fourth channel, online channels and online, we saw it for large companies only. The large companies, this is a micro company, small companies. We started to think about them. We bought them a platform. We created a special software for them that gives them all the product catalogs, the validation, payment, the buttons, and the transportation. We started to get people out of the box and get them out of those that wanted to sell in this fourth channel. Come along the way. Just go to social networks, be in Facebook, be in Instagram, and make an operation which is very manual. Have this product, deposit the money. When you deposit the money, I verify. Finally, I get a transportation company and I send it. But no, we changed. That's not the evolution that online sales required. This is not what SMBs needed. That's when we started to think that they needed more. They needed more. As Andy says, you have to look at more. And we are giving a cost-benefit analysis where they obtain some interesting profits for coming. We've made an additional development in inventory management. Inventory handling are difficult in our country, especially for SMEs. Those that have access top-notch software are few. Multinational, they're too expensive and too cumbersome. They do it well, but we've created with a Colombian company a special software to work for SMEs and small companies and mom and pops to work on inventories. This makes them feel at ease in this economic cycle and feel that that we are giving them more. And finally, we created the Circle of Knowledge program, which this conference is part of. After getting to know Get Abstract, and with Alejandro, we started to work on this, and we found an important fill-in and complementary. We want to give knowledge to our customers in an affordable way, to have access to knowledge, but our customers, Coordinadora's customers, since last year are obtaining their license in Get Abstract. Summaries, abstracts, compile abstracts of the bestsellers and authors like Andy's, of universities, of the latest moments of knowledge, and this is what we're doing so that they go beyond, a little beyond. Of course, if they do well, we'll do well as well. And our innovation focus is there. This year we have all the things that we don't want to give expectations about, but there's a lot coming out in the pipeline. I believe transportation has to go there in Colombia well beyond, because we're more and more committed with SMEs and the tiny little mom and pops and small companies.
Nicely put. Nicely put. You can keep it. So I'm going to give everybody we have a couple questions. Let me roll through and we'll get maybe two at the close. So really quick, anyone ever give a TED Talk? So I'm going to give you a 30-second instruction on when you're asked to give a TED Talk, this is the 3 things you need to think about in terms of delivering on the stage. And I'm going to ask these 5 gentlemen to deliver a 1-minute TED Talk based on the question I give them. So here are the 3 things you do. You walk out on the stage, stand on the red circle, and you start by saying, "Hi, I'm Andy, and I believe in imperfect over perfect." And let me tell you one example of why I believe that. And then, so the first thing is, I believe in something. The second thing is, let me give you an example to that belief. And the third thing is, I invite you to participate in my belief system or my charter or my manifest. So in the spirit of, you now have been given the instruction on how to give a TED Talk. Everybody has a TED Talk in them. Everybody should give a TED Talk, if not on a TED stage, in their own environment. So it's, I believe something, here's a quick example, and I invite you to participate in my belief. And you walk off with confidence, right? So I'm going to ask these guys, anyone ever give a TED Talk? No? Here we go. You're the first. Stand up. Ready? Everybody. So here's the question I want you to deliver on in the form of a TED Talk. From your perspective, and this is a pretty good perspective, how do we innovate in politics in Colombia?
I believe that, good question for him. Everything you've heard this morning, there is one that is ingrained in my mind, which is Uncle Mitch. Uncle Mitch is going to come out as how can we innovate in politics? How can we innovate in the government and in the state apparatus? Innovation is who wants to be Uncle Mitch, capable of standing up there and saying, my gosh, let's do things differently. Let's try to find the true sense of what we're doing, and let's try to do the things that are difficult but make them easier, and let's worry more for the things that unite us more than the things that separate us and divide us. That's when the innovation process begins. Understanding what's the value added of every person and how amongst the talents, and add a sum of wishes and wills of a collective will, we can make the difference. That is Uncle Mitch that I hope to be in Colombian politics.
You know you get extra credit for weaving Uncle Mitch in there. God rest his soul. So let's go to Santiago. Let's roll, right? So here's, you get a second to process it, then you got to deliver as well as you did in the 1 minute and a half.
Sure.
What advice will you give the entrepreneurs from Bogota in order to start innovating and taking advantage of the opportunities in the apps economy and bringing them to market? What advice would you give to the entrepreneur around doing what you've done?
Above all, people always they ask us, how did you do it? They think that behind us there's a lot of know-how, a lot of in research and geeks and talent, of which I have the very few, very little. The message and the recommendation that I have, again, for you to begin something or to innovate is truly jump out of the window and learn to fly right there. What we do in Rappi is to find a problem and to crash on head on, and to learn to fly by ear. A valuable recommendation from Andres, from Avianca, is to learn to make mistakes cheap and fast. We're good at Rappi for that. We make a lot of mistakes. Not too cheap yet, but we need to improve on that. But the recommendation is do that. Don't fear. Jump out of the window. Say yes more often, as much as you can, and then see how it can be made happen. But this is what drives and pulls not only you as a person, but a group of people that didn't want to say yes.
So very quickly, I'd like everyone to just think for the next 10 seconds of a joke, and then I'm going to pick one or two of you to get on the stage and tell this joke to make everybody laugh. Okay? So you have 10 seconds. Think of a joke. So I'm not going to pick anybody. Do you have a joke? Do you want to scream it really? Is it fast? Stand up, deliver it really fast. Big joke right here. Is this a joke? Okay, give it up. The microphone's right to your right. You got 30 seconds.
Which one is the happiest fruit?
Which one? What?
It's in Spanish.
What is the happiest fruit?
Orange, of course. Right? It has to be. All this joy? So is that the answer? So that joke was kind of okay. It wasn't great, but it doesn't matter. Because when I asked you to tell a joke, everybody looked down except for you. Everybody looked down to their left. Because they didn't want my eyes to make eye contact with your eyes, because the risk of getting up here and telling a joke could be awfully embarrassing. But it's really not that big of a risk, is it? And now on the way out, isn't everybody going to slap her a high five and say, hey, bad joke, I got a better one for you, right? And she's got 400 new friends. The perceived risk is a lot greater than the risk itself. The perceived risk, to Santiago's point, is much greater than the risk itself. We put artificial barriers on us as perceived risk. They are not risk at all. They're perceived. That's what Santiago was talking about. So we're going to go to, where are we going to go here? So Andres, Avianca, here we go. So your belief is around this. Avianca is well known for the important service culture. How can you innovate from a client service point of view? A little bit of what you talked about, but give us your strong conviction and belief system on that.
Yeah, I've always asked me the difficult question. Come on. We don't agree or we commit. We disagree, but we commit. Ideas are so many ideas around how to change the customer experience in Avianca, that if we were to implement them all, we would have worked for the following 200 years. And the reality is that the experience is not going to change in that span of time. What can we do to choose some? And we might not agree on some of them. But what we want to do is to generate consensus around, if we choose one, we all commit as an organization to make it successful. And if we commit and we succeed, we should generate a step ahead to change the customer experience in Avianca.
TED Talk. So here's what I want you to write down, to Andres' point, write down the two words, loyal opposition. So when my company was growing like this, and investment and private equity was putting money into the business, and we went from 1 to 10 to 50 to beyond international offices, I was overwhelmed in all this growth, and I didn't know quite how to handle what Santiago is going through right now. I was 28 years old, and the company was growing like a weed. Internationally, tens of millions, then 100 million. It was growing like a weed. And a colleague of mine came up to me, and he handed me a card that said loyal opposition on it. And I said, Jeff, what's that mean? And he said, I will always be opposed to you to make the idea better, but I'll always be loyal to you. There will always be a loyalty, like a spouse, but it's my job to give you an opposing point of view or an opposing perspective in order for us to get a better outcome. We will always disagree, but we will always commit. We'll disagree with each other, but we will commit. A massively important intangible in the idea of innovation. Having loyal oppositions inside your company that speak the truth in service of goodness. And they will be looked upon and be chastised a bit, but they will actually rise up because people know you can't deny truth and you have to have truth tellers. But they will give you that perspective that keeps you honest to a better idea. Here we go. Let's you want to? Here we go. There, you're up.
It's me or no?
Batter up. Here we go. Welcome Ernesto to the stage, and you are answering around your belief system. How can a university like yours bring innovation knowledge to Columbia? I believe
in innovation, but the first thing that I do believe is in the present. What current society has forgotten, students, entrepreneurs, executives, is to be present, to be here and now. The present is the most valuable moment we have, and that's what we want to inculcate. The equation is to be present, to accept high level of imperfection, and always want the happiness of others. This is the great treatise that I like, Eckhart Tolle. I started to read him, Eckhart Tolle, and he says there's two moments in the day where we are present. First, and we say hello to our pet. We are fully present. The rest of the world disappears. And two, when we say hello to our children, we're there, or the people we truly love. At that moment, it seems to be that the world disappears and they are there. We are connected. We are mindful of that present. Anxiety is killing current society. We want society to progress through mindfulness and being present. Present, accept high level of imperfection, and looking for happiness through being here and now. That's what we look for. That's the innovation we can predicate here, because at the end, you are the ones in companies that daily bring your stories and create your narratives, but we have to tolerate each other. Thank you.
So the visual expression of being present, better nowhere in the world will you find it in the Marina Abramovich Google that and see how she went through that process and that experience. And more than anything, I've given that video to hundreds of executives and said, if in fact I brought you 2 chairs and you put them in the hallway of your office and people walk by them, might it serve as a symbol for being more present and being more connected? And now executives are putting folding chairs, not fancy ones, but cheap ones, in the hallway and saying, this is where we act out that idea of being present and being connected, because it's so critically important. And all these things that feel very soft are the things that are the difference in this topic called innovation. Last but not least, so I want you to answer this one, not from the perspective of your company, but all companies, is the closing act. So where is it? What is the role of the leader in innovation, in creating the culture to create? What's the role of a leader? Give us your belief system on that.
Muy bien. Mire.
Very well. Look, I firmly believe that innovation is inside companies. It's right there. Innovation doesn't depend on any one person or an area or a department or a division. Company is there in the ideas that people have, even if it's not in your area, and not necessarily in marketing, commercial. They're out there, those that live the day-to-day. But for this to come out, we cannot use just the communications department to work, and for it to spring out, we have to inspire people and tell them that those people, these things that are outside their routine, outside their job, are also valid, and that builds the company, it builds the organization, and makes your companies to develop. And it's there where the trick, in my way of seeing, of innovation, get them out, because that's where the leaders appear. And these leaders first have to be convinced. We have to persuade them to come up to the plate that that's where we have to develop these companies. And people will understand in their teams that any idea, any idea, any idea, the competition did this, the competition did that, any idea that has to do with what they have in their daily life and doing has the possibility of being important, of being more than criticized or assessed, and they can feel important with their ideas. There will additional matters is execution, of course, but they're out there. Don't let them depend on a single area or any one person. What we need to do is that they depend from everybody, and everyone becomes dependent on each other with the capability of delivering ideas. These are wonderful. I know that many of you are thinking about this because this has happened in companies. This is not new. Innovation is being done in Colombia for a long time. But how to do it well? These great ideas that we hear from Andy, of Rappi and other panelists, are things that have been happening. But these are the ideas that have been that have been allowed to come up, to spring out. I invite you to make innovation in your companies with your people, with everybody, from any job, from any position.
Right. So my last thing I'd ask you to write down are 5 words. And these 5 words are the basis of my book that came out in 2011. It's had a crazy ride like Orange Economy. Totally unexpected. I'm not an author. I'm not a writer. I cobbled this thing together and it's resonated. And I think one of the reasons it's resonated is because it's really simple to access, like the Orange Economy. And the 5 words that make up the book are the words that we think are the words that are the ethos that help grow or change an organization or entity. The first word is mood, M-O-O-D, mood. What is the mood of your organization? When you walk in, do you want to be there, just like we talked about with the restaurants? It's your job to be the mood maker. How do you feel the culture, and where should the culture be, and what can you do to change the culture? It's culture, mood. Mindset is the second word, mindset. And mindset is not like the collective culture, but at the individual level, how is it that you're prepared to have a confusion tolerance? Take risk, embody your passion. This is individual. Is each person's mindset prepared and have the propensity for innovation? The third M is mechanisms. And I beat up a lot today on processes and tools and technologies and techniques and infrastructure. These are all the things that are the mechanisms, the levers you pull to make innovation work every day. The fourth M is measurement. What are we measuring and what should we be measuring? And I would tell you that the executives I work with at the biggest companies, when we talk about these 5 M's over the course of several years, these 5 M's, or the 3 W's, word, work, way, become the work of leaders doing innovation. It's not a complex system. It's not a huge architecture. It's a few words that give you an aperture to look through to keep you honest, to staying on that ride. The measure word is the word that often comes into play more importantly than you'd ever imagine. What is it we're measuring, and what should we be measuring? And if we're measuring these things over here, how might we alter them or just slightly change them 1 degree in order to have a effect or impact of 5 to 10x of where we are now? If it's a MBO, or it's a job performance, or it's a P&L, or it's a balance sheet, or it's a customer inquiry, or a customer journey experience kind of assessment, if we're measuring those things, like a lot of us are, how might we just tweak those in order to drive more innovation and unleash the potential of those ideas that you're measuring in order for them to see their greatest opportunity? That's one. And then on the other side is, what in fact should we be measuring? Ivan, what should we be measuring countrywide as it relates to the growth in the trajectory of Colombia? What's the few things we should be measuring?
I think you should be measuring, first of all,
Happiness. Denmark, right? Denmark is the earmark.
you should be measuring
Income for equality.
formal jobs,
Formal jobs. Nice.
and I would say the amount of new corporations being started.
And the amount of new corporations, and I would even add on the amount of new that brings something not only to Colombia, but to the world, right? Be recognized as an organization, or I'm sorry, a country that brings things to the world, and have that kind of level of kind of optic of how we create and why we create and the intentionality of why we create.
Quality.
And a fifth, it being equality. Beautifully put. So the last M word is momentum. Mood, mindset, mechanisms, measurement, and momentum. And the leaders, which largely would be the people in this room, for being here on a Tuesday morning and not doing the work of a company, you are likely the leader. You need to think about the first and the last most critically. Your job is to create the mood and make sure it's maintained. That's your job. You should be more than you should do. Be you as a person and walk through the hallways as someone who has passion, conviction, intention, stories, being, right? Be you as much as you can, because you're at this place for a reason, and the other people will take care of a lot of the doing. That's your job in this role of innovation. Alejandro, where do we go? Time out, what do we do? Thank everybody? I want you guys to thank these guys for being brilliant. And a little standing ovation. And his team did all this work to bring it all together. Stand up and thank them for all they do.
Who win the consultancy.
Okay, so are we going to do it? So we're, it's kind of a funny raffle. Someone's going to win. And my wife's going to be very jealous, but it'll be okay.
I'm going to say 1 hour of consulting, 1 hour of consulting, 1 hour of consulting. 9-7. 9-7. 9-7. Who won 1 hour of consulting? So we are waiting for you here to take your information. Thanks for attending.
And a special thanks to Coordinadora for putting all this together for us.